Tell us you're a Nigerian without saying a word. Energy security is one of the most pressing issues for many developing countries like Nigeria. And if there's going to be any meaningful progress, addressing our energy issues is non-negotiable.
I need to see light from my house. Make them do something.
Band A is expensive. I literally have to turn off all my appliances just to reduce costs.
We need light.
Introducing the Energy Outlook, your go-to show for everything energy. Every week, we'll bring you the latest insights, innovation, and in-depth analysis of Nigeria's energy sector. From policy discussions to regulatory insights, we will analyze the key decisions influencing growth and sustainability in the energy sector. We'll bring you the human stories behind the headlines, giving you a personal perspective on the broader energy challenges. Join me every Friday at 6 p.m. for the Energy Outlook, your guide to the future of energy, where energy means business. Welcome back. This is the Energy Outlook Live, and today we are discussing disruption in the downstream sector in Nigeria. Dangote refineries recently announced this week that it will be distributing PMS, which is petrol motor spirits fuel, as you will call it, directly to the filling stations, we will call the retailers. And this has caused a lot of hullabaloo. But this is a disruption that many seem to have welcomed, and ordinary citizens are very happy as it will cut off the middlemen of the business. But is this what is right for the sector at this time? And that's what we're discussing today. My guest to join me for this conversation is Mr. Adio, Managing Director of ASCOM. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start straight ahead. This is causing a very major problem in the sector. And if your ears are on the ground, you hear some are in support and some are not. You are well informed on some of these things. What is the idea behind Dangote wanting to supply or distribute fuel directly to the filling station? He cannot be in the upstream, the midstream, and downstream altogether. Is that even possible?
Well, I mean, firstly, you have to view it from a business point of view. Okay. And one of the first things you learn in business school, in Michael Porter's 5 strategy options, is organizations will typically pursue an internal low-cost structure to make them more efficient, to increase profitability, and to make them a lot more competitive.
Okay.
So what Dangote has done has simply pursued a business model that lowers its entire cost structure in the mid to long term and positions it to be a lot more competitive and perhaps even outmaneuver its competition or other competition that seeks to want to enter the entire market. So you can just entirely view it as some sort of a business model re-engineering by the Dangote group or refinery, as it were, to strengthen their position in the marketplace, and outperform any competition. And, in a deregulated market, or in a market-led economy, where efficiency is the language of competition, it's hard to fault the decision that organization has made, given the level of investments it's made into the sector over the last 2 years. So primarily, you can just view it as a pragmatic business decision that you could call a business model re-engineering, pursuing an internal low-cost structure that allows them to be a lot more competitive and sort of puts any intending competition at a huge disadvantage.
Well, many have viewed this idea of wanting to put out the competition entirely out as monopoly. Many have said if Dangote supplies directly to filling stations, then you put the rest of us out of business. Is that correct?
That's absolutely not correct. It's only a problem if Dangote runs filling stations. And that's when you'll be playing on both sides. And that becomes, a bit anti-competition. But at the moment, all he's simply doing is finding the most efficient way to supply products to the retailers across the country. And what he has also done by that nature is to take away the cost of distribution for many of these retailers who sometimes have, to pay a certain amount of margin to move their products from Lagos to perhaps Potiskum or Azare or Bauchi or Meduguri. That takes away the cost for them. And they can increase profitability. But more importantly, they can also deliver low-cost products to the end user at the last mile, which is the consumer like you and I who go to the petrol stations to buy these products. So to a very large extent, it is wrong to say that the move is anti-competitive, largely because all he's simply doing is finding the most efficient way to deliver those products to the consumer. It's also important to stress that by virtue of the PIA that has created a level playing field of every actor, in the local refining space, there's absolutely no way any organization can be accused of running a monopoly because if you meet the requirements today, you're going to be giving a license by the NMDPRA. And I know for a fact that, there are so many other small, of course, you could say they are modular refineries who have licenses to refine internally. But you have other organizations or business interests that also have, local refining licenses, many of whom are not operational at the moment. And so there's, as long as other people have licenses, as long as there's a level playing field already created by the PIA, I think it's just a bit lazy to argue that, Dangote is a bit of a monopolist. That would be a very wrong judgment. You wonder why the same is not said about electricity distribution companies, because in most states, it's just one major company that is distributing electricity. In fact, in certain regions, you have one major distribution company covering 3-4 states. The reason is that there are certain businesses that require a very high amount of investment, a high level of critical skills and human capital to be able to break even or succeed in those industries. And that by virtue of the costs of the barriers to entry into those businesses, you limit the amount of people coming into the space. So you can't just wake up one morning and say you want to start up a distribution company. I mean, it's not like
there are steps you need to go
exactly.
through.
It's not like setting up a pure water company, right? So by virtue of the nature of certain industries, whether it's energy distribution or a local refining company, it requires a huge amount of resources, huge amount of capabilities. And so by that nature, very few people get into that space.
So Adele, I want to ask you now, so what does the PIA say? What does the law, what are the regulators saying about this move by Dangote to supply directly, to the retail? What does the law say about it?
So
is there an angle we need to look at?
So exactly what I said, the law actually doesn't restrain a local refinery from supplying, retailers, direct products, right? So it's completely silent on that. It only becomes a problem, an anti-competition problem, wherein the likes of the FCCPC can get involved when refineries also then set up filling stations, right? And also become involved in the business of retailing. Then you can make the arguments that, perhaps you're trying to, sort of put several other competitive businesses at a disadvantage. But as long as all you're simply doing, I mean, it's no different from what the soda drink companies do when, they find distribution to small retailers in Ladipo or small, retailers in Shomolu
to supply to them
exactly.
Directly.
So it's just the same thing, looking for most efficient way to distribute your products across the country. And if you ask me, I would argue that he borrowed one of these tricks from these soda companies who have found an excellent, efficient way to distribute their products across the country.
So if this seems to be a good thing, why are the independent marketers or the marketers having a big issue with it? Why it just seems to be an opera everywhere?
Well, it's a good or bad thing depending on who you're talking to, right? For the consumer, which should be the primary factor here for me personally, and I would argue the most important factor are the primary consumers. For the primary consumers, it's a big win because it means lower pump prices for these products, for the last mile. Of course, you know that before today, people were buying these products at a more expensive rates in Maiduguri than you were in Lagos.
Or Abuja.
You paid more in Abuja than you were paying in Lagos. Now, what that meant also is that the fact that people were paying a higher cost on energy in most areas that had a higher level of poverty, it means that they were dealing with higher levels of inflation than you're dealing with here, which means they had more pressure on household income and had very little discretionary income to drive consumption in those places. Now, if the cost now goes down by virtue of, taking the cost of the distribution of this product, which, many analysts have argued takes about 10 to 30%, depending on the distance and the location and things like that. If that price reflects in the end point of the product, what you have done essentially is to free out discretionary income from people in these areas. They will buy more, stimulate the economy more, and they'll have a lot more for household expenditure. And so that's a big win for families in many places where the prices of energy had been, relatively above what was obtainable in Lagos. And that's also a big win for the local economy in those places, because people are going to spend more on other things, because energy is not something you can substitute. It's a necessity for most people. They have to drive, they have to run their businesses, so you have to buy petrol, you have to buy a diesel, right? So if you're paying less, it means you free up income to do other things. So it's a big win
for ordinary citizens.
For ordinary citizens.
Okay.
Now, the only people who have a problem with this are the other businesses who are in the business of distributing petroleum products across the country.
Yes, because they import it, it lands at the depots, and then they are also able to transport to different areas. So maybe the worry now is that entire, network that they have has been completely, about to be taken over.
But you see, you've also answered the question, and I wonder why they are crying wolf.
Okay.
Because firstly, Dangote is distributing his product across the entire country to retailers. That's the products that are refined in his refinery. He's not helping to distribute products that are imported into Nigeria. And we're going to have a different debate about that, whether or not...
Yeah, I'm coming there.
Whether
After
or
this,
not
I'm coming there.
there is sense in the continuous importation of petrol products. But it's happening, right?
Okay.
So what I need you to understand is, at the moment, he's distributing his product
from his
refinery to retailers across the country who are interested.
In a major way. 4,000 tankers.
Fantastic. But it's his product.
Okay.
So it means there is still a market, albeit a market that many of us has criticized, but it's still a market for those who are importing petrol, for those tankers to still distribute those products across the country.
Okay.
So if you think about it broadly, he's not necessarily disrupting their market, because they are still importing products, and they are still going to be lifting products from the importers, like you said, from the depots and everything to other parts of the country. The problem then comes because once the products reaches the retail end in Maiduguri and in Bauchi,
the price goes up.
The price at which Dangote is delivering to retailers there is obviously cheaper than what the importers.
So everybody begins to buy from Dangote.
Thank you very much. Now, I don't want to sound unsympathetic to their plight, but like I said earlier on, we have no business importing petrol into this country in the first instance, because we already have the ability to meet demand locally. If everything that we have heard from the industry stakeholders, if everything that we have been told from the NNPC is true, then to a very large extent, if you combine what the Dangote refinery is producing and what our local refineries are purported to have been producing, then there's a tendency that we already are able to meet local demand. And even if we're going to import, we'll just be importing a fraction.
Because what the PIA says is that the moment we have the capacity to refine in the country, but has it been proven clearly with the facts out that a Dangote refinery or all the refineries put together can meet our local demand?
Yes, I can guarantee you that with all the refineries put together, are you including the government refineries?
Maybe.
Well,
I said maybe because,
you know,
we don't know if they are working
eh,
anymore.
exactly, because
Okay.
we shouted for a time that this Port Harcourt thing that they are celebrating too quickly and all of that, and that's why I said if you take their word for it, because the argument at the time was the refinery was working at about 70% or 80% capacity. Now, if you took their word for it and added it to what the Dangote refinery is doing,
Yeah.
you could argue that we can meet local demand with what we have. And if there was going to be a shortfall, it will just be a shortfall of about 3-4 million liters. And that will be what will be expected to be imported based on the PIA, right?
Okay.
But so that we don't lose trail of this argument, it is that at the moment, they have enough products to distribute from the petrol that is being imported to the country.
Okay.
The problem is that they have refused to distribute their products in the most efficient manner, to their retailers across the country. And rather than throw a pity party, what I would expect business concerns to simply do is to also find an efficient way of distributing their own products.
What is the efficient way?
Now, what even makes the Dangote own special?
Because it's doing it in a very massive way, I think.
Not really. It's because they're going to be powered by CNG. Now, again, it's important to also state that while it looks like a brilliant business decision, it's a huge cost that the refinery has to be taking over a certain period of time. Because if you look at it as a strict business decision, what is happening is that Dangote is betting 3, 4, 5 years down the road, which is the cost of transporting these products on diesel engines across the country. Say, for the sake of this our conversation, it will cost me 100 naira a year. If I do it with CNG, it is going to cost me 5 naira a year. So I have 95 naira savings, right? But remember, I have to put a sunk cost to invest in those CNG trucks, to purchase CNG, to pay drivers over a period of time before I am able to break even to match up with that 95 naira differential with which I wanted to cover initially. So that means that in a strict business sense, you really have not necessarily left these guys behind. It's just that they are being extraordinarily lazy, because all they simply need to do, there's a federal government program that allows them to convert
the presidential
right?
initiative.
So you can convert your
So you're saying
diesel
all the trucks that
engines.
Dangote is putting in the market, they are all going to be on CNG?
Of course, they're going to be on CNG.
So the question now is, what is Dangote seeing ahead that we seem not to be seeing? What exactly is it? Because the fear again, if you hear some of those marketers say, is that they fear that the plan in the long term for Dangote is to take over those filling stations and begin to also be in the downstream to retail.
So when that time comes...
Is that the plan?
No, I mean, I'm not in the mind of Alaji. But when that time comes, or if that time comes, you can make your case, with anti-competition laws and get the FCCP involved and things like that. I do not think that is the case. I think that Dangote Refinery is just simply looking for the most efficient way to distribute products to retailers across the country and to lock or improve or increase his market share. It is standard market penetration strategy, what you learn in strategy 101 in any business school. And that's simply what he's doing, to penetrate the market and locking as much retailers over the long term that will be loyal customers to the products that he will be distributing over a long period of time. So for those that are aggrieved, like I said, all you just simply need to do is to plug into the presidential CNG problem. Change your engines to CNG, and perhaps you'll be able to distribute products easily across the country. It's also important that sometimes I wonder how the mind of Alhaji Dangote works, because sometimes he seems to be like a businessman who has set up shop somewhere in New York or in Massachusetts, because this decision that he has made is impacting 3 areas in one. The first, like I said, it's an internal business reengineering that helps him save cost in the long term and makes the business more competitive, which is a big win for the business itself. The second is that he's delivering value to the last mile and end user customers like you and I, who will be enjoying lower prices. Thirdly, is that he has taken away cost burden from retailers who will before now incur a higher burden of transporting products from Lagos down, to their various filling stations.
Yeah.
The fourth, obviously, is the environmental impact of heavy-duty engines powering across the country.
Now on CNG.
And now on CNG, a more cleaner and friendlier, energy tends to protect our environment better, and helps reduce air pollution that would have otherwise been something to worry about if we were putting 4,000 diesel engine trucks on the road, at the same time. So in one master stroke, he's solving the environmental problem. He's creating thousands of jobs for young people. As you know, this will create about 8,000 jobs on the go. He's delivering better value for the consumer. And obviously, he's putting his business in a better long-term position to be more sustainable and profitable. So it's a master stroke of a genius, if you asked me.
Interesting, Mr. Ayodele. I have a few more questions, but we'll go on a quick break. And when we come back, there are other things I really want to know. What happens to NNPC at this point? Where are they? And the regulators, what are they saying? Is this fine? What is the long-term or short-term gains on all of this? We'll go on a quick break. And when we come back, I have those questions for Mr. Ayodele. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. This is the Energy Outlook Live. And we've been discussing the disruption in the downstream sector within the energy space. And a lot of interesting happenings there. Of course, Dangote is at the center of all of this, against all the marketers and independent producers and all of that. So all of them have an issue with why will Dangote want to distribute or supply fuel directly to the filling stations. But as an ordinary Nigerian, I feel that it's a benefit for me. But the issues around this, what we are discussing, I have in the studio Mr. Ayodele, who has been speaking to me on some of this topic. So I'll come back to you now. And my question is on the major part they've raised. Now, you said it to be creating 8,000 jobs. But this other people now, the marketers, claim that if we allow Dangote, only Dangote do this, and if it doesn't just focus on refining, he's also going to take our jobs. Is this correct?
Well, but again, that's why I don't, it makes me sound a bit insensitive, but
Okay.
they are being shockingly lazy. Nobody's going to take your lunch if you're willing to compete. The problem is that they have been spoon-fed for too many years in this country. Remember, they were being paid equalization fund for so many years. Exactly what Dangote is doing now to deliver products, some sort of uniform cost across the country. They used to be paid that money so that the price you're selling a product in Lagos will be the same you're selling in Kano. So for so many years, they have been spoon-fed and had found no reason whatsoever to run more efficient business models. And this, for them, is like a shock therapy that is waking them up to reality of a deregulated, sector.
Yeah.
Now, rather than waste a lot of time and energy complaining about what Dangote has done, I would expect very serious businesses to begin to ask themselves the question how they can also pursue internal reforms that will make them more competitive over, the mid to long term. And it's not rocket science here.
No.
All you need to do to be a bit more competitive, as Dangote is to also find a way to run, on CNG, train better drivers, do the hard work of engaging retailers across the country, run a business, and stop this parasitism that has happened for so much, where you just sit down, government rewards you for doing nothing. They are all bloated big men now, and that's really the problem. They no longer know how to run.
But many will argue that you're saying this now, but even though we want to switch to CNG, the argument is enough infrastructure is not in place to help us achieve that. And the major energy marketers association of Nigeria are saying that even though this CNG, truck idea is worked on by Dangote, there seems to be not enough, infrastructure in place to allow for all of us to switch. Do you agree?
Well, I won't debate the fact that we have not done enough to invest in the infrastructure to make CNG a mainstay. In fact, the presidential CNG program has dropped the ball on so many instances, and I've had reason to criticize them for that, right? You know, but you see, the point that they are trying to also make should actually give them an advantage if they were actually serious about running a business. Because if indeed there is not enough infrastructure for Dangote to power his 4,000 trucks, doesn't that give you an advantage somehow to be able to deliver products in more efficient ways when their trucks are busy looking for CNGs, right? So again, the problem here is that you have, and with profound respect, you know, a group of businesses who have enjoyed being coddled by the federal government for so many years, who, when they sneeze, they want the entire country to catch cold. I mean, these are the people that when governors in Lagos even try to sanitize that Apapa corridor, they will threaten you with strike actions and things like that. And we all just have to submit, you know, to their excesses because we want products distributed across the country, right? I think the real problem is that that monopoly of power that they used to hold is now being broken because they will no longer have that kind of hold that they used to have on the Nigerian economy where, you know, would have to submit to their will when they threaten you with strike action and the fact that you're not going to have products across the country. This sort of takes that power away from them.
Completely.
And that's a major concern.
So
you know, that
this
they have.
initiative by Dangote will kick off in August.
Yes, as they say.
Correct. Now, by December, do you think the cost of PMS will come down to like 500 naira?
So let me be honest with you, and that is, it would be unfair to say that the cost of PMS will drop to about 500 naira because of this initiative of Dangote, because there are so many factors that play into the cost of petrol at the pumps every time you drive into the filling station.
What are they?
You know, the price of crude internationally is a key factor, you know, that will determine the pump price of petrol. Now, as you know, there's a serious ongoing war in Iran, you know, obviously being attacked by the Israelis with some sort of support from the Americans. The Iranians have also threatened the Persian Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz, to make it more difficult for petroleum products to move across that corridor. What it means is that the insurance company will raise premiums on ships that are carrying crude, you know,
through that corridor.
And that means higher prices of crude at the end of the day. And so, as you know, once the price of crude goes up, it means the refining cost obviously goes up. And that means we have to pay higher at the pumps. So I think we would have to be cautiously optimistic that while this initiative is designed to deliver lower costs to the consumer,
Locally,
the global reality, you know, especially in the Middle East today, might sabotage that. Because if this war continues, what you're going to see is that the price of crude will go significantly high. And that means the cost of refining products will go high. Now, the beauty is that if the cost of crude, for instance, hits about $80 per barrel, all right, or $85 per barrel, the shock that it would have had at the pumps if we did not have an efficient distribution system will be far worse than what we'll be dealing with because of this efficient distribution that Dangote has put in place. So in simple terms, if the shock in the global market in terms of the rise in the price of crude would have forced the pump price of petrol to go to like 1,200 naira per liter, because of this efficient distribution, you might have it at about 1,000 naira per liter, saving about 200 naira of what would have been the real figure.
and this increase is because the global
global
shock might happen.
Exactly. So you're likely to see that increase go up, but that increase will not go as much as it would normally because of this efficient system that has been put in place. So, I mean, what our prayer should be as consumers is that the resolution is found very quickly to this issue in Iran. Because if it's sustained, if there are retaliatory actions by the Iranians that makes the distribution or disrupts the distribution of crude across the country, then we're going to be in for a bumpy ride. But the good thing about oil prices, we have this very funny relationship in Nigeria with crude prices, wherein if the price of crude goes up, the federal government becomes richer, but consumers suffer. If the prices of crude comes down, consumers enjoy, the federal government suffers. So is this it's some sort of a ping pong relationship?
If the cost of crude, like the way you've analyzed
Yes.
now,
If it goes up, the federal government is happy because they would have more resources at their disposal.
In this context now, do you see subsidy coming back?
I knew that was where you were going to arrive at. So there is the argument that could play out at that time that, if the price of petrol will be hitting 1,200 naira per liter, then it makes absolute sense that the federal government looks at the benchmark in its budget. So if it puts $75 as a benchmark in its budget, and crude is about $85 per barrel, that's like $10 savings.
Yeah.
That $10 savings can be plowed back as some form of subsidy that puts the price of petroleum products down over a period of time, so that we do not fall back
but by that time,
into this inflationary
but by that time,
environment.
the likes of Dangote would have taken a chunk of that market. Does that mean that
when you're paying for subsidy, because the subsidy is not for Dangote refinery, is not for oil marketers, the subsidy is supposed to be for end users like you and I.
how would they get it at that point?
So that's the point. So you sit down. You see, again, that's the beauty with a refinery like Dangote. And I don't even know why we're discussing subsidy, but you can see from their books what the cost structure is. The oil industry is so transparent that we can sit down here and can predict to you what Dangote's refining costs are, because they are global standards, they are global benchmarks across the world. There are no hanky-pankies. You can't hide anything. So for instance, if you're paying this refinery this amount to subsidize products for consumers, you know what you're putting in, you know what is expected to come out of this. It's as transparent, as Uncle Sam's teeth. So what you need to do in that instance will be to have a very simple arrangement with the refinery to ensure that this amount of subsidy gets to the end users as consumers. And it's very simple. You are not subsidizing the refinery. What you're subsidizing is the end user through that particular refinery. And these are just...
Where is an NPC in all of this? What do you see, what role do you think they should be playing now in all of this? Because, they used to be the only, supplier into the market before.
Yes.
They play in the upstream, midstream, and downstream. They're in all of it. So, but now we don't even hear so much.
You're not even supposed to be hearing from NNPC. NNPC now, it's an NNPCL now.
Yeah, NNPCL.
So it now manages our assets on behalf of the federal government.
Because they are the biggest competition to Dangote, in my view.
So they manage most of the assets on behalf of the federal government and pay some sort of royalty to the federal government of Nigeria, right?
Yes.
And that should be their function. So if you looked at the PIA, you will see that it clearly defines the role of the NNPCL, the NMDPRA, and things like that. And that's why you're not seeing them speak as much as they should, because they really and truly should not be on the headlines of newspapers as much as they should in a fully deregulated space. Because, thanks to the new management, you're now seeing a bit more, what's the right word to use now? There's a lot more clarity on the terms of reference of the NNPCL from the new management, given that they were very senior stakeholders in the oil and gas sector. I envisage that we're going to see better management going forward. And that's if the culture that has been pervasive in the NNPC do not swallow them up. I expect them to bring their private sector experience to sanitize, that entire sector. But clearly, the role of the NNPCL, the NMDPRA, NUPRC has clearly been spelled out in the PIA. What I'd like to see is that all of them stick to the dictates of the governing law of that sector, and then we'll be able to attract more investments from the international market. Then we'll be able to achieve, the local content, the backward integration that the PIA actually was designed for us to achieve and things like that. And generally, the federal government will then have a lot more revenue, being paid back to it in
The
taxes
refinery
and
in Warri and
royalties.
Port Harcourt, what are your views on it?
Sell it.
Really?
Yeah, just sell it. There's no point. See, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different result. People thought Obasanjo was stupid when he said the most sensible thing to do about this refinery was to sell it. This was about 18 years ago. Since then, we've been foolish enough to spend billions and billions of dollars in turnaround maintenance. And where are we? So let's stop whipping this dead donkey, right? And sell these things off to private concerns who will bring in their monies. You will make money. The refinery would work. Petroleum products will be readily available. And the competition will bring prices down over the long run. So I just see no reason why we continue to hold on to this thing when there's clear evidence that we really cannot get this thing back on track as we expect to.
Interesting. So the last part of what is a concern, especially to many Nigerians, is the issue of corruption, accountability, in all of this, especially if we allow Dangote, go on with this initiative, no matter how it seems so good, and as a benefit to all of us. Corruption, accountability, what are your take on all of this? What exactly should we be worried about?
No Nigerian should have the moral stance. And let me qualify that better. No Nigerian that hasn't been vocal and critical about the NNPC should stand on any moral ground to talk about corruption and accountability from a private entity like Dangote that is governed not just by local laws, but international laws, has very strong corporate governance, with one of the most competent, not just management team, but board, across the world. So it already has been a private concern, raising the kind of capital that it raised to set up that refinery, having the kind of board that it has already compelled a certain level of transparency and accountability. That's why it is bound to publish audited accounts, that is going to be public documents. It is bound, by certain governing standards and international reporting standards. So there's no hiding room for the refinery. The problem over the years is the stinking, humongous corruption in the, NNPC and co, that it became such that even governors had to be fighting at FAC meetings for the NNPC to remit money to the Federation account.
So from the way you're sounding, many would now say, it seems like Dangote is the messiah that's come to save the sector.
To be very honest with you, I can guarantee you, if we did not have a functioning Dangote refinery today as we speak, would have been in a complete mess, given some of the decisions that, the president took when he, came into office, what he calls bold reforms. It is squarely because we have a local refinery today that the prices of our products has not hit the roof. Imagine if we're importing all we needed as a country today. The pressure on our foreign exchange market, the fact that it will widen our fiscal deficit, and by extension, it will also weaken our currency and raise the product economy. So
if I let you, we'll be going on and on and on.
Mess.
But really, this has been productive, and I really enjoyed that we could touch many areas in this conversation, because the disruption is actually a big one.
Oh, yes.
And everybody seems to be worried from different angles. But Mr. Adio, Managing Director, ASCOM,
yes,
thank you so much for your time on the program.
I appreciate it.
We hope to have you back again to look at how
Hopefully.
Things are progressing.
Hopefully
in August when
No problem.
it kicks off.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, it's been an exciting show today. I mean, you can see the kind of conversation we're having. We wish there was more time, but we have to go now. This is what we have for you for this week. Until next week, we follow the conversation. CNG And the infrastructure is another critical part. And we'll look at what we can do to bring, someone to tell us more about CNG and what it can do for us. My name is Wisdom Chap Jumbo, and see you next week, same time, same station. Make sure you keep it with us. If you missed the episodes, you can watch on our YouTube channel at Official Upgrade TV. Thank you so much. Until next week. Have a lovely weekend. Tell us you're a Nigerian without saying a word. Energy security is one of the most pressing issues for many developing countries like Nigeria. And if there's going to be any meaningful progress, addressing our energy issues is non-negotiable.
I need to see light for my house. Make them do something.
Band A is expensive. I literally have to turn off all my appliances just to reduce costs.
We need light.
Introducing the Energy Outlook, your go-to show for everything energy. Every week, we'll bring you the latest insights, innovation, and in-depth analysis of Nigeria's energy sector. From policy discussions to regulatory insights, we will analyze the key decisions influencing growth and sustainability in the energy sector. We'll bring you the human stories behind the headlines, giving you a personal perspective on the broader energy challenges. Join me every Friday at 6 p.m. for the Energy Outlook, your guide to the future of energy, where energy means business.